The three things I wanted to talk about really was the impact of COVID-19 and the physical distancing in terms of love languages and physical touch, and for those who really need it. The second thing I wanted to look at and explore really are some of the challenges faced by those whose primary love language in terms of giving and receiving is physical touch. And the third thing is to really just maybe think very briefly and succinctly about ways of overcoming some of the challenges for those who really need hugs, really need the pat on the back, you know, at work, those who really need the high fives from friends and siblings and other family members. So physical touch is one of the five of love languages with which we communicate love, according to Dr. Gary Chapman. So Dr. Gary Chapman is a marriage counselor over in the States, and after 30 years of marriage counseling, he deduced communication as one of the major issues in relationships, miscommunication to be precise. And he deduced 5 ways that people give and receive love most naturally. Okay, so in terms of the impact that COVID-19 is having on those whose primary giving or receiving love language is physical touch, I've got 4 points that I really want to make here, especially for those of you whose primary love language is physical touch. So important for everybody to know, we have 5 senses in our bodies. You know, we see, we hear, we smell, we taste, but the biggest of all of those senses is physical touch, and that's because we have more receptors across our body and over the span of our body than we do receivers of any of the other senses. Okay, so we have a huge potential to feel really loved by touch, simply because there are receptors all over our bodies. Okay, I mean, we know that even, for example, if we have a pet, when we, you know, touch or stroke our pet's head or behind the ears, you know, they're concentrated areas, but the impact of that is, it can be quite huge. And same with human beings, you know, just even the smallest touch in the right place at the right time can absolutely do wonders for somebody's love tank. Yeah. Second point on this is the correct use of physical touch. So physical touch can actually make or break a relationship. And that is to do with the freedom of the gift of the touch. So when we are expressing it as a form of love for somebody else, firstly, we need to be giving that freely. So we're not forced and we're not coerced into doing that to somebody else. But likewise, the person who's receiving that love, it can't be really forced on them neither. You know, they have to be free to receive it. They have to want to receive it, or at least be available to receive it. You know, if they're not, and we try to force it on somebody, we essentially step over their boundary. Yeah. So, and there are different degrees in terms of how much that can happen on somebody else. So, in terms of giving and receiving physical touch, this freedom is critical and really important. And if we think about the situation that we're in at the moment, which is lockdown, essentially we have a government that's enforcing legislation and guidelines that are essentially restricting our capacity essentially to express love in a physical form and to receive it. So to a certain degree, this has been taken out of our control. The freedom to be able to express or to receive it has kind of been taken out of our control for the time being whilst we are in lockdown. So this is going to be a challenge for those people whose primary giving or receiving love language is physical touch. Another point is that in times of crisis, what do we do as human beings? we cry on each other's shoulder, we hug each other. This is a fundamental expression of our humanity and solidarity with each other, is to actually touch each other. And we are in a crisis at the moment, and we're unable to do that. So, unless we're in a privileged position to be living with others who can receive or give us physical touch as an expression of love, then we might be in a place where we're feeling a little bit deprived and unloved. So, during these times of crisis, the challenge is really very real for those people whose primary love language is physical touch. And lastly, on that and the impact that COVID-19 is having on those people who I'm going to call physical touchers right now, okay, because it's just easier to say. The purpose of physical touch is to affirm your love for another person, and likewise for another person to affirm their love for you. Yeah. So whilst we've been in lockdown, we've been stripped of this to a certain extent. So let's look at the people who are in hospital, suffering from COVID-19. They're in desperate need of love, even if they're not conscious. Or even asking for it. It's a fundamental human need to be loved, to love and to be loved. Actually, I love that line in Moulin Rouge, the movie, where they really make a good point of that. That we're here to love and be loved in return. Yeah. So those who are suffering from COVID-19, they need love, and the only touch that they can receive is that from the paramedics, the nurses, and the doctors, who would probably love to express their platonic love for their patients through touch, but don't have the time to do that, or have to separate the emotional communication of love from the professional act of serving and healing. So in other words, there is a separation happening between the emotional communication and the actual act of the touch itself. And this leads to all sorts of problems. And this is where, for example, use and abuse happens if we're taking it outside of that context and putting it in a relationship. Physical abuse is exactly that. It's that separation of the authentic communication of love with the actual act of the touch itself. And obviously, if the touch is a negative one and leads to hurt, it leads to abuse, and it is abuse. So in terms of this purpose of physical touch, we are experiencing at this time really a deprivation of love, because even in hospitals, because they don't have the time, or because they have to keep professional boundaries there, that kind of expression of love through the healing touch, through comfort, through consolation, even by the medics and the people who we are calling our heroes, who are our heroes, that is being stripped of its warmth and its tenderness, its color, and the degree of selflessness. The act of selflessness really comes as part of the motive of that physical touch, the communication of touch. So that's a little bit there about the impact of COVID-19 and physical distancing. So what are some of the challenges faced by physical touches during the time of physical distancing and lockdown? Well, firstly, let's break this down into two. Let's break this down into the people who love to give love and who feel really fulfilled by pouring out their love in physical touch or by physical affection. And then the second group of people who would be the receivers, those who feel most love when they are being touched. Yeah. So for the givers, I think that the question that would be most asked is, where is all my love that I really want to express? Where is it meant to be expressed? Where is it meant to go? Where is it meant to be channeled? And And here there are 2 points, and I'll make these 2 points as well for the receivers. But the 2 points is, you know, how much we are able to experience love ourselves through the act, given the circumstances, and then the respecting of boundaries of others when we are doing that, and how in terms of how we do that. So unless we live in a household where other people can absorb and receive your love communicated in a way that's physical, you're going to feel as though you're not spending or outpouring your love. So it's almost going to feel like, I need to just release this love that I have in my heart for, you know, whoever, or just the love that's already there. It needs to be poured out. You know, we're kind of created in a way where we are meant to be pouring out our love. It might not be natural to us at first, but the more we do, the more it becomes the habit of doing so. And I think that, you know, the majority of who I speak with are mums. So you as mums would absolutely know this to a T. You as fathers would absolutely know this to a T. That, you know, it's almost like intrinsic in us to actually pour out our love, you know. But what happens if there aren't enough people who are there to receive that love? What happens if I'm living alone? You know, who can I spend that love on? What can I spend that love on? These are really part of the challenges of people who are who have physical touch as their primary giving love language, and it's most natural to them. The respecting of boundaries. So there may be a tendency to cross boundaries if the people you can touch at the moment have to absorb all the physical touch that you want to give, when actually that would normally be shared out among others, among more people. So perhaps, you know, you have your immediate family, or you're living with an immediate group of family, and there are 4 people in the household, you know, but you would normally, under normal circumstances, have 20 people in your close group of friends or family that you would normally hug, and that you would normally kiss, or that you would normally pat on the back, or, you know, sit right next to when you're watching a movie, you know, just to feel that person's presence there. You know, when those other people aren't present, those people who are present are going to have to absorb all of that kind of love that would normally be shared out among other people. So that's something to really be aware of and be respectful of as well. I mean, I will talk in a second about how we can overcome that challenge, but that's something that needs to be kind of looked at by awareness, self-awareness and awareness of the other. So for the receivers, what about the receivers? What if my primary love language, the way that I feel most loved, is through physical touch? Well, my main question would be, where am I meant to get this love from? You know, where do I find this method where I can feel loved at this time? So again, the love tank and the respecting of boundaries issue here. Unless you live in a household where other people have learned to love more effectively through physical touch, or do this naturally anyway, then you're going to feel an amplified loss of affection and an emptiness that is needing to be filled. So in other words, just to break that down, what it's saying is that if I'm not receiving that love from the people who do live with me, or if I'm living alone, for example, I'm not getting that, full stop, then I'm going to feel this loss and this emptiness. I'm going to feel that there is something really missing in my life at the moment. And that lack of feeling loved is going to hit us in a very, very big way. And actually, you know, this could lead to all sorts of other issues. Yeah. The second point there that I want to make for the receivers is the respecting of boundaries. So what could happen is that to compensate for the loss of communication of love, so to compensate for that loss of receiving that physical touch from other people, we may ask too much of it from the people who we do live with. You know, so our need is essentially greater than the demand is greater than the supply that is out there. And this essentially could lead to a resentment, you know, because others have their needs met at this time where you feel that you can't have your need met at this time. So it causes a lot of issues at the moment. There's a few people who are really asking about envy and jealousy, and my conclusion behind that really was the fact that they're not receiving the love that they're needing to receive at the moment, you know. So there is a resentment that's happening there. Now, this won't be true for absolutely everybody, but it could become a tendency if it's not checked. Yeah. Just to remind people of really a fundamental principle of love here is that it's 100% oriented, other oriented, I should say. So love is really something that we can only give. We can't demand it from somebody else. We can't change how much love we are receiving from other people, and we can't change how others love us in return neither. So we need a communication there. We need to communicate, I should say, the desire that we have for the love that we really need to receive. It doesn't really matter what love language you're talking about. It doesn't have to be physical touch. It could be any of the other love languages. Essentially, you know, we can only really communicate our desire and our need to feel loved in a particular way, but we cannot make others love us in the way that we want to be loved. In that sense, love is really other oriented. Yeah, it's not something that we can actually force. You can only really give your love. How the other person gives their love to you is entirely up to them and their decision, essentially. We can learn how to receive and give love in its other languages. Remember, there are 5 there. So it might not come as naturally to us to love in another love language, but for the time that we are in the lockdown and there is this physical distancing, it would help to start learning how to love, to learn how to receive and to give love in its other forms. We have the power to transcend the act of love into something that fills us and makes us more loved, but also vice versa on the other person. And lastly, on that point, yes, we can love ourselves, but with the view and purpose of loving others. So like I said, it's 100% other oriented. And yes, we can love ourselves, but the purpose of that is to be able to serve others. So again, the end goal is for others. So the ways of overcoming some of those challenges, I've already touched upon those. You know, learning to master the other love languages during this time, both in giving and receiving format. This is essentially what we call a maturation of our emotional intelligence. Yeah. To know that what the boundaries are of those around you. So greater communication between the two. That's the second thing, the second way of overcoming some of the challenges. To know yourself and know when your love tank is satisfied. So self-knowledge is the third one. From 2, actually hugging yourself physically. If you are if your love language is physical touch and you're a receiver, hug yourself from time to time, because actually it does smooth a lot of stuff in your heart. And know that everyone needs physical touch too. It's a fundamental human need. Yeah, it's a fundamental human need, and it means that everybody at this time is going to need physical touch. It's just that those whose primary receiving love language is physical touch will feel it amplified even more, and it's greater for them. So that's the summary. That's the kind of overall message that I really wanted to share with those whose love language is physical touch, either in giving or receiving. And if you want to know more about the love languages, I do have a workshop coming up on Saturday the 6th of June at 2 p.m. So it's free as well. So do feel free to join me and the others who will be joining me. And thank you so much for joining me live, guys. It's my first time, so I would really appreciate lots of feedback. So thanks, San, for being there all the way through, and Love you guys loads and speak soon. Bye.